Welcome back to another Black City Coffee vlog. In this video, I wanted to give you an update on what those coffees tasted like that we roasted last time. So we had a Robusta, which was a natural processed coffee, and then we had a China coffee from the Manglan region, which was a washed processed coffee. Okay, so we did two versions. We did a couple samples on the Ikawa, and then we did a couple of production roasts. All right, so the first one here, let me show you what they taste like. So the first one, this is my production roast, but I had it at a medium sort of like development, so like medium, or a medium roast and then medium development. So it'll go roast level and then development level, which is kind of weird. Another weird way to be naming coffee. But we did the Robusta, right? I got 12% loss. The smell, or the dry fragrance, was old tires, so not like new tires, right? It's kind of a burnt caramel. When I tasted it, it was plain popcorn and a brown butter finish. No acidity at all, but velvety in its body. Okay. Next, we had our Ikawa number 2 version of the Robusta. This time I did a medium dark roast and then a high development. I got a 13% loss. The smell was rubber gloves, so a little different. I worked with rubber gloves a lot, like nitrile gloves actually, to do a lot of meat prep and things like that, so that smell was pretty apparent. When I tasted it, however, kettle corn, more cocoa than caramel, so we didn't really get a lot of great sweetness, I think, developed here in this medium dark high version. Okay, but again, when we're sample roasting, what we're trying to do with this sort of tool is to really just see what the green has to offer you. Because if you're using it as a sample roaster, like whatever it is, say it's like a hot top, say it's like a smaller Mill City roaster, 500 gram or whatever, we're just trying to see the potential of this green, right? What does this green taste like? You know, I don't want to impart just solely roast flavors on it. I want to see what origin and processing tastes like. So we're really not to try to roast it too much as possible, right? Even though Robusta, you're supposed to kind of take it into medium, dark, almost dark levels. We don't want to take it into very dark into a sample roast, because then you won't be able to taste any, if any, nuance or what the green has to offer you. Okay, this one, interestingly enough, very minor acid here. All right, the third Ikawa sample that I did was the China wash process one. So I did a light roast and a medium development. So again, really not trying to take this into a medium level roast level, especially for a wash process coffee from China. So the smell I got was molasses, very sweet, and then jam, so like very sweet concentrated fruit on the smell, on the dry fragrance. When I tasted it, it was big ferment flavor, and then kind of like a orange honey, so like honey that you get from like orange trees, so a little bit of that marmalade-y, orangey kind of, but very sweet. And then black sweet tea, very sweet black tea. Okay, so those 3 were the Ikawa samples. Now let's see if we can compare this to my production roast for China. Okay, so now we can bring up our roast curve, and this is our roast curve. Okay, put this over here because you can't read anything anyway. So what we got here is the smell of soy sauce. Whoa, what happened? Soy sauce and roasted meat. So I was like, whoa, this smells kind of dark, right? But this is what happened with this roast. Now let's remind ourselves what happened in this roast. This is not a full charge on a machine that ideally you need to roast full charges on. Okay, so the full charge of this machine is 1,000 grams or 1 kilo. I got about 821, I believe. I put 1.8 pounds right there. All right, so I had a little bit of a higher drum speed, right? Like I explained in the last video when I was roasting this, the data is a little wonky because the probes are not kind of sitting right in the coffee bed in the drum, so you're going to get a little weird kind of wonky data. But don't worry about that when you're doing don't worry about the data so much when you're doing an experimental roast or for the first time. The only reason why we'd want to be really concerned about data and pretty curves is when we've already nailed it. All right, we know it from the cup that this is what we want it to taste like, and then when we go to production to produce, you know, the production roasts of this profile, then we're going to be hitting these numbers mostly all the time, right? And kind of looking at numbers versus like roast the coffee. Okay, but in these like experimental, have fun, learn the coffee, we're going to just roast the coffee and we're going to get kind of wonky data like this, but it shouldn't affect our opinion of the coffee before we even cupped it and before we even have a whole picture of what's going on. This is just really a very small piece of the pie, and we've got a little bit of a handicap in that this batch size is not ideal, right? So we're going to just take this data with like whatever, with a grain of salt, basically, okay? Otherwise, I think we got some uneven development here. We had a really good first, I think, phase, and then I think the heat kind of got a little too away from it. With this being a low elevation but washed coffee, it really kind of behaves like a natural. And I've only had one shot to roast this, so I would have taken this data, and then on my second attempt I would have been like, okay, yeah, this right here tells me I had too much energy in this roast. So my charge for this coffee was I think it was 360 or 370, I forget. I think I put it in the last video, so it was either 360 or 370, but with a very short, you know, middle like this, you know, with it cracking already at 7, it cracked early, so I'm like, I had too much energy or I had too much heat at this time, okay? And then, you know, to balance this out, as I was just trying to roast the coffee, I was like, okay, let me just go for a little bit longer third phase, right? Because I know I didn't get the best development or the most even roasting in the middle phase. Okay, so that's why we have this little tail end here where I'm trying to push energy back into the roast, so we see this little crash and flick. Yeah, the famous crash and flick. But I'm not worried about it because when I cupped it and I compared it to what my tasting notes were, let's bring those up, okay? So on the smell portion, yeah, it didn't smell that great. We went a little too hot. This kind of makes sense. Too hot, soy sauce, roasted meat, right? But then when I tasted it, I got a solid sweetness. It was mellowed out. The ferment was there, but not overpowering like the sample, right? So in the sample, I probably had a better development here and a pretty short third phase, okay? As compared to this production phase, production roast, we have a short middle and a little bit longer last phase, and I think that makes sense with the tasting notes here. Okay, so it mellowed out this way. So this is a good sign for me. What do I do with this information if I'm like looking at this new green from China that I may be interested in? Well, based on the data that I have in front of me, I'd be like, okay, it has the ability to go pretty crazy in its ferment flavors. That could be useful. I could maybe use that in like a blend when I want to have a lot of super fermenty jamminess, and depending on the price of this coffee, then I can kind of like gauge and put a value on how much I like that ferment quality of this coffee, because even though it's washed, it behaves like a natural and kind of tastes like a natural too, which is odd. But I think culturally it makes sense culturally, because I think, Jared was telling me earlier, is like, yeah, in China, they just like that. You know, they like fermenty coffees. So even though it's called wash, it's kind of tasting like that. So I don't know if this is graded as, I don't know what its grade is from like an SCA graded, Q grade or anything, but I could speculate on it, and it would be, I think, a little wonky, I think, in its scores. I think the China market versus say like American market, maybe that's not gonna match up fairly great, just because of the weird like this wash tastes like a natural kind of thing. Okay. Okay, and I got ripe grapefruit and a vanilla round sweetness. Yeah, whoops. It was pretty like, okay, you know, a lot of ferment. I taste a lot of the process in this coffee. Is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but definitely something to, I think, just be aware of, you know. Let's move on to the production roast attempt number 1 for the Robusta, which is this one. Attempt number 1. Remember, the data got corrupted. I couldn't save it. Anyway, that data, it didn't crack. I remember it had one outlier. Where can I put this guy? Over here. It had one outlier, and I was like, uh-oh. And then the crack didn't happen until like, that little crack didn't happen until like 9 minutes, or not 9 minutes in, like way later. It didn't crack, basically. So here's what it tasted like. New tires, okay? Peanut butter. All right, so kind of a rawness there, obviously with it not cracking, and not even getting to a proper like development and not hitting enough heat, I think, in the roast was an issue. There's like a bitter cocoa powder. It's slightly rubbery, and the rubber went away at 17 minutes, so well into, you know, letting it cool on the table. And that was my first attempt at the Robusta, and I was like, okay, with that information, I just need to hit it harder with a little bit more heat, and that's what this is right here. So you can look here. Where can I put this guy? All right. Yeah, we had a charge at like 3, was it? I think it was 370, because I wanted to go longer, further in the roast, right? So we had a pretty solid first phase. Our middle phase was quite long, because we're trying to go for like maybe dark roast, right? But I caught it off here at like 20%. And I think definitely taking this into a dark roast, you probably will lose this sort of, you might lose that popcorn flavor, maybe. Or if you do a really good job at just like controlling heat throughout the roast of this Robusta, you may be able to create this like really sweet popcorn, which I got in my my Ikawa, right? My Ikawa sample. I got Kettle corn, which let's now compare that to Hasea's, so their tasting notes: nutty, sesame, caramel, kettle corn. Yeah, I mean, I've never tasted popcorn, kettle corn in coffee before. That was a totally brand new tasting note for me. And yeah, that was kind of exciting, you know, not necessarily something I want to taste. I like fruit, I like floral, I like you know, more acidic forward coffees personally. But yeah, I mean, the smell, latex gloves again, sort of a waxy chocolate, dry fragrance. And then tasting it, I got popcorn, sort of that burned oil. If you make popcorn at home, you burn a little, you say you use some, you know, oil in it, and you burn a little bit of it. There's kind of that stinkiness to it. And then again, that cocoa powder, chocolate, dark chocolate thingy in there. But yeah, we took it into, you know, this is probably still a little underdeveloped for a Robusta. You want to take this maybe even much further here until like maybe 3 minutes, you know, maybe 30 seconds more, maybe 45 seconds more. I don't know. But yeah, I felt like we had much more control of our roast this time, and we stopped at around 12 ROR. So we didn't bottom out. We didn't totally lose energy and lose control of everything, right? So yeah, that were the tasting notes, and that's what they tasted like. And like, I think I definitely don't want to roast it again, but I like, I don't think I'll have any use for it. When I cupped it, I was wired, just because there's 2 times the amount of caffeine in this green, right? At least twice the amount of caffeine as Arabica varieties. So it's definitely something people use as a mixer, as something to blend, something to market by means of like, hey, this coffee has extra kick and caffeine, and you can actually say that with real confidence and not just be like, hey, this is dark roasted, oh, so it's really strong, so pseudo like has more caffeine, which is not true. So this one, if you want more caffeine, you want a kick to your coffee, yeah, you could definitely blend some or straight up drink Robusta, which I don't think is that much very pleasing, but mix it in with something. Even that China that I had, big fruit, big ferment flavor, mixed in with this like solid popcorny chocolate popcorn thingy. I think that could be an easy little blend that you can get away with for sure, just for the added caffeine or just that nice body. Like, I think the Robustas have great body in their coffee, no acidity, you know what I mean? That's not what you're getting it for, but great body, lots of caffeine, good for mixing, good for blends, and not overly expensive. So this is going $4.89, so kind of the same, a little bit more expensive than say like a Brazil Ipe Natural. It roasts kind of similar to that. It's got a quiet crack, kind of have to watch it a little bit in the roaster there, but then when you find it, it maybe take you maybe 2 or 3 tries to find your groove with it. I think I could find it in 3 and have some use for it, but I don't know. I don't think my customers or the people that buy coffee from me are really or actually not, they don't want caffeine. I mean, they don't want a caffeine high. They don't want all this like extra jitteriness from coffee, so they just want, greatly processed coffee. That's it, so yeah, that was interesting. I had a lot of fun, and let me know your experience of roasting Robusta and what it tastes like for you. I feel like I did a good job of getting away from too much rubber taste. I did maybe smell it a bit, but the taste was not really there. And that, in the end, that's what really matters, is what's in the cup. All right, cool. So that was fun. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.